So what I'm going to have a look at is how to remove the door lock mechanism, which is this one here, and also the handle that's on the outside to open and close the door from the outside. First thing you need to do is get it to this position here, where the door card's removed and the liner on the inside that holds the speakers is also removed. Have a look at the video that I made on how to do that. I'll put a link in the description. Also, you need to have the window all the way up, otherwise the window's going to be down here and it's going to be a bit of a pain and get in your way. If you haven't got the window all the way up, and I would actually suggest getting it up all the way up, is you can actually disconnect the plug off the motor here and put some electrical, just some alligator clips, and put a 12-volt battery on that and actually motor it up or down to the position that you want pretty easily. I'll show you how to do that. So with two leads connected to the terminals on the motor, I can just put the terminals on a 12-volt battery and just motor it in the direction that I want, reverse the polarity, and I'll just motor it all the way up, which is where I want it for this. So simply the way this works, you've got the locking mechanism here. This is the Bowden cable that comes from the handle of the inside, so if you pull on that, that's actually going to unlock it inside here. In addition to that, the door handle on the outside has a Bowden cable that goes to the same unlocking mechanism. So when I pull on that handle, it's going to operate that Bowden cable, which does the same thing on the inside. I've disconnected it here, but there's a cable that's connected. That's actually, for this one here, there could be either 2 wires or 6 wires for this. If you've got the keyless access system, there's actually a sensor that actually goes down 2 wires on that plug, but that will need to be disconnected. The other 2 wires here, the brown and blue, are just for the door opening sensor. So it actually just tells the system if the handle is actually being pulled or not. So that will be up here. You'll need to disconnect that, and you can also just disconnect that clip from where it's actually held up the top there. But then you've got 2 completely separate units here. We just need to disconnect the cables so we can actually pull one out at a time. To remove the external door handle here, the first thing that needs to be removed is this plastic cover on the outside. There are 2 M6 nuts that need to come off. So when those nuts come off, this plastic cover just pulls straight out like that. That brings the Bowden cable with it. On that right hand nut, you actually don't need to pull it off completely, it just needs to be loosened, because on the underside here it's just got this little sort of clip here, and once that's actually loose, it actually allows that to move down like that and just come free, and that clips up onto the other side of the door handle, which is actually going to come out from the other side. So that's the thing that sort of joins the 2 things together. On the passenger side, apparently it's different on the driver's side, we'll have a look at that in a moment, but to disconnect the Bowden cable here, all we're going to do, it's got this plastic clip there. I'm just going to use a pair of pliers there just very gently. That just rotates pretty simply. You can just now pull that out, and then that can just rotate around and the Bowden cable can be released. And once all that mechanism is removed from the inside, you can actually just grab hold of the handle from the outside and just pull it out. There's a couple of little sort of hooks that it just needs to be lifted up over the top of, and then it'll just come out, and then you'll rotate it like that to coming out, and there it is. So this is the outer door handle when it's removed. So this is on the passenger side. There's a spring here, which is a thing that obviously loads up the handle itself. If you just get a pair of pliers and move that, you can rotate that around like that. And then if you just push those 2 pins out, then you can actually just remove the handle itself. There's a seal here on the outside that can be replaced, and this is the actual micro switch here that tells you if the door is open or not. So all those can actually be replaced as separate parts, which is kind of nice. I think you would need to have the door handle replaced. Oftentimes they get bashed around a little bit. So with those 2 pins punched out, all I did was just use a hammer and a punch just to knock those out. You actually knocked them out, basically supported that under something there, and then just knocked it out towards the inside on both sides. And they just popped straight out. They actually came out quite easily, because they're just in plastic. That'll come out, this little bush on the inside of the spring. And on the other side here, there's a little lever here for that micro switch. This was the thing that I was actually chasing. It's actually just sitting on a little lug there. So that just pulls straight off like that. So in that hole, it's just that little square lug. And once those pins are out and that little thing is off the end there, push it up like that first, and then it'll just rotate out like that. Obviously, to install it is the reverse. You can see there's the keyhole there. This is on the passenger side, so it doesn't have one of those, but obviously on the driver's side, that would be the emergency key entry point. At the risk of having a little bit of a rant, this door handle on this car had been replaced by somebody, I don't know. They had no idea what they were doing. When I opened up the door, there are only 2 of the 4 bolts that hold on the side airbag behind the door card. All of the electrical harness wasn't clipped in properly. And the thing that I was actually chasing was this micro switch, because this arm, as it turns out when I got here, was bent, so it wasn't actually activating the micro switch. So you wonder why we want to do it ourselves. This is just some of the shoddiest work I think I've ever seen. I hope to God it wasn't at actually a Porsche dealership, because this is shocking. And now when I open the door handle, it gives me the correct indications. Before you put the door handle back together, I have a bit of a practice run just so you know what you're looking for. The way this fits together is the little lugs here is actually what this grips onto. This is actually on a little pivot. So when you put it in there, then you push the bolt down and the outside, and that'll actually lock it in place. So it'll look like that. And then when you push that down, it actually locks around it in there. Problem I had was that the people who'd worked on this before had bent this lever inside, so I had to pull the whole thing apart. A couple of things that are important. If you've actually removed the door handle and you put this pin back in, it's actually quite important. It's going to slot into there, so you need to make sure it's adjusted correctly. It's pretty easy just to knock it back and forth one way or the other to get that correct. But if you actually need to remove this mechanism here, and that's the only way, because this was bent, to get that out. First thing I'm going to do is just remove that. There's a little torque screw there. Once that off, that just pops out, and then that lever just wiggles off, pulls out like that. And then to actually get this out, you actually need to remove this piece here. First thing there's actually a little clip on the end there. That just needs to be levered off. That'll get a bit out of shape, doesn't matter. You can just use some small pliers and reshape that, so you can just push that back on later on. The first thing after that needs to come off is this little rotating bit here. It's only just sort of does that the whole time, but it just holds it that way, and there's a spring in there that does that. So the spring just doesn't just spring off and end up on the other side of the shed, because it's a bit of a bugger to get it back on correctly. Down here you'll see one end of the spring. Just lever it off that way so it holds it in place, because it's actually held at the other side here by a little loop, and getting that back on again is a bit of a pain if that just jumps off. You can do that, because that's what happened to me, by actually pushing out these little rubber stroppers. You can just push those out like that, so you can actually get the spring in place there. But then once that is off, then this thing just rotates around. You pull it out a little bit, and then that just comes out, and then this thing can just pull straight out. And I had to reshape that, and obviously the install is the reverse of that. On both sides, this plug here, which is the one that attaches to the actual handle, the micro switch, and also to the Kessie system, if you've got that installed, this is a real bugger to get off. It's clipped onto this one here. This one plug actually slides off it that way, but it can't come off whilst this plug is actually attached. And the problem is that on this side you can get your hand there, but on the other side, it's close to impossible to get your finger in there to actually press it, so you can actually slide this plug off that way. So this is the method that I found worked the best, is that this clip down here, which actually holds it to the door frame, it's actually a, what do they call, a Christmas tree clip, which is one that actually sort of has these lots of little things that stick out, so you can actually pull that off, just wiggle it out, and you can just push that back in later on, and then that'll actually allow this harness to be fairly clear. And then when you actually remove the two screws here and actually bring the cover off, as soon as it comes out a little bit, then you'll be able to get your hand around the other side of this plug and actually be able to remove it. And then from there, you need to pull this one that way. Now on the inside of here, you can't get access to it because it's blind. There's a tiny little barb that will get broken off when you do that. That's just life. You're not going to be able to do anything about that. But then when you actually slide this back on later on when you install, it actually holds in reasonably tightly without that barb there, but also as soon as you put that plug on, the thing can't come off anywhere. So it's not a problem, but this is probably the hardest bit of the whole removal of the door handle mechanism. When you open up the driver's side door and you're looking at the locks and the door handle, it's a little bit different to the passenger side because you've got this cover here to start off with. The way that fits together, I'll pull that out, is that unlike on the passenger side where that position there would just have one of those cream rivets, this has actually got an M6 screw through it, which actually fits through there like that, and there's actually got a hex on the inside to hold it in place. But when this is in its correct position and actually fit the thing, that screw will poke through that hole, which is what you actually unscrew that nut off when you're actually removing the subframe. So you actually just get it and just push it through, and it'll actually fall out the other side to release that. And then the last thing here, we've got this little clip. It's got that little barb there, so you just get a little screwdriver and just reach down and just push that down, and that'll allow that to be released and come clear. The locking mechanism on the driver's side looks like this. So you've got the key there which sits under the handle for an emergency, and on this side here is where that actually engages like that. So it's going to be sitting like that inside the car. When you remove this, you need to remove the lock first. I guess you could probably pull both out at the one at a time, but this is actually on a flexible funny little shaft, so to move this out, you can actually just sort of pull that out like that when you actually remove the lock, and you can, I'm not sure whether it would actually be pretty hard because you've got to pull this way to actually try and get this off. So I suspect you wouldn't be able to get this cover off, so you need to remove the lock first, and then you can remove this to get the door handle out. When you're actually installing this, you'd be putting this in first, and then when you're actually installing the door lock, you have to get your hand in there and pull that like that, so you can actually put that in place and then allow that to flop into the correct position. Removal of the door lock itself is pretty simple. Now, what you'll find is the Bowden cable that goes to the bottom here of the lock, which goes from the handle. That can stay there for the moment. It'll be clipped in down the bottom here. You can just remove that clip. This can stay in for the moment, the inner handle Bowden cable, and then you're just going to remove the two screws on the outside here. That takes an M6 triple square, and when you install those, they get 20 Newton meters. You just remove those, and then this just pulls straight out. If you want to disconnect the Bowden cables, which you'll have to release it from that handle, that's similar to the one on the other side. You just get that like that and just rotate that around, and that'll just pop straight out. And then you just rotate that around and it'll just pull out of that lug. Once that's off, this one on the bottom here, you can just rotate that one around, and that'll allow that to be pulled out, and then again that can be rotated around, that thing will actually pop out. Just be a little bit careful. As I've done that, that lug there has broken off. Now it'll actually slot back in correctly, but just something to be careful of. That is obviously not that strong. Something I forgot to mention, there's a single plug there with 6 wires, single press to release, that's going to go onto there, and then actually I think it's around that way like that. Yep, so it's and press, and obviously just pull that off prior to doing anything else. There are a few things that you can dismantle on the door card. You can obviously remove the switch if you need to replace that. You can actually remove the door handle, and you can remove the door opening lever. To remove the switch on the inside here, you've just got a plug, just press on the underside and remove that. It's going to be smaller on the passenger side because it's just a single door opener. And then these push out from the bottom, but unfortunately the clips on the side of them tend to break. So you've got these holes here. Get a pry tool or a screwdriver and push in there and push it upwards as you're sort of pushing upwards on the plug, and that'll allow those to release. And also get in on the underside here and push it there as you're sort of pulling from the other side. So actually you're pushing up on those clips. Otherwise they tend to do that, which is that there, because there's only a tiny little piece of plastic actually holding those on. So be a bit careful with those. To remove the door opening handle, a single plug there, press that down and then remove that. That's for the door handle sensor just there. And there are 5 screws around the perimeter of that. Once you remove that, that just pulls straight out, and there's your door handle there. So to remove the door closing handle, there are 4 screws to remove. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then that just pulls out from the other side. And that just wiggles out. It's a bit of a tight fit getting that one out, but it will come out. There we go. And now you can only have the harness on the inside here and clean this up, do whatever you want to it.